Hey there, Internet friends. Trevor Starkey here with another episode of my 2017 Game of the Year coverage. Before diving into my favorite games of the year over the next couple days, with honorable mentions tomorrow and then my top 10 list on Monday, I will be diving in today to my biggest disappointments of 2017. Now, historically, this is a list that has taken the form of worst games of whatever year I'm talking about, but this year, as I looked back on the year, it wasn't so much games that bothered me, more so I was taken aback by trends in the industry or the community at large and that kind of stuff. And so looking at it from a 30,000 foot in the air view, that's kind of what I've chosen to focus on here. I played a handful of bad games, but I want to talk more about the bigger picture stuff. So coming in at number 5, we kick things off with 2017 feeling like the year of nostalgia. This year, more than any other in recent memory, really seemed designed to cash in on gamer nostalgia. Now that we are, 30 plus years since Nintendo hit our shores in the 80s and 85, it seems like we've kind of reached that point where now that's the generation that we're selling to. We're selling a lot to the people who grew up with it, like myself. And so you had games like the Crash Bandicoot trilogy, you had Sonic Mania, you had Super Mario Odyssey was very much a callback to Super Mario 64, you had Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was very much kind of a modern take on the original Legend of Zelda, where you just kind of go out there and do whatever you want. You had Yooka-Laylee as a callback to Banjo-Kazooie. You had Mass Effect Andromeda as a continuation of that much beloved series. You had even the SNES Classic. You had all these things that either directly or indirectly are reflecting eras of games past. And for fans of those respective things, that can be a great year for you. But for me, as somebody who didn't have pre-existing relationships with a handful of those, I tried to jump into them and, be a part of the buzz, and then I often felt underwhelmed by it and was just trying to figure out, okay, well, why did these people love this thing so much in a way that I'm not connecting with it? The biggest culprit, I think, was probably the PlayStation's original flagship mascot of the Crash Bandicoot series. Using my original PlayStation as pretty much just a Final Fantasy device, I never really played any of the Crash games, but people spoke so highly of them that I really wanted to give them a shot. And so when the trilogy got remastered and came out this year, I picked it up, fully intent on playing through them. And then, none of them connected with me. I tried each of them up through the first world, so I got kind of a feel for each one. And they are indicative of an era past where, if I was playing this 20 years ago in middle school and had the time to just spend all night trying to get through one level, sure, I'd probably enjoy this game. But I'm an adult now and I have more responsibilities, but I don't have anywhere near that patience now, and with no nostalgia making me cling to these games, I just put it away and didn't look back. Sonic Mania was another example that hit a lot of the same notes. I played the Sonic games back on the original Genesis, but that too was a lifetime ago, and with only a passing enjoyment of the series, instead of this deep-seated love for it, I didn't appreciate how certain levels had been remixed, or how music had been, updated to reflect, to honor the history of the series, but also, throw in some new stuff over the years. And so it's another one where, without hesitation, I just kind of muttered to myself, I'm not having fun, and walked away from it. You had Mass Effect, which is a series that I do love, but Andromeda just ended up, in part because it was shipped prematurely to hit a fiscal year end, but it just fell short of the game's potential and wound up being, sadly, very forgettable compared to, the monumental ways in which the Shepard trilogy are remembered. Even now, I'm struggling to recall any of the cast members, your crew members' names, or what big decisions you made in this game. And I played it all the way through. I think I did even every side quest that didn't glitch out on me. So it's terrible that a game of such high regard with characters and these weighty decisions ended up being so forgettable. That's disappointing. You also had things like Yooka-Laylee seem to underwhelm a lot of fans of those classic Rare games in the vein of Banjo-Kazooie. The SNES Classic, at least, was more plentiful this year. More people were able to get their hands on it, but for me, at least, I picked it up and said, you know what, I really don't have any desire to hop back into those old games. I, have fond enough memories of playing them, and if the mood strikes, sure, I'll boot it up and play through them, but I'm not the target for nostalgia, it would seem. The nostalgic entry I think that probably surprised me the most this year, though, comes in the form of my next entry. And number 4, the one that is most closest to a this is a worst games list, but it is not on the game itself. My number 4 is the deification of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And I want to say up front that I think The Legend of Zelda is a perfectly adequate open-world game. It's not among my favorite games of the year, it won't be in my top 10 or anything like that, but it's nowhere near the worst thing I played either. So when people are like, oh my god, you just hated Breath of the Wild, that's not true. I didn't love it in the same way that so many other people did, and that's what catches me off guard here. So much of the conversation around this game, in part, I think, largely came as a result of its connection to the Switch and Nintendo's new hybrid experiment. How is this thing going to work? This console and hybrid, and so much of the conversation has basically presented this as the pinnacle of gaming, and I just don't get it. I have very fond memories of the series. Notably, Link to the Past is one of my favorite games of all time. Ocarina of Time is one of a lot of other people's favorite games of all time. I think Link to the Past did it better and did it first, so Ocarina doesn't wow me in the same way that Link to the Past did. And then you also have The Wind Waker, which I think is a phenomenal example of the series and what Zelda games are when they're hitting on all cylinders. But when I dove into Breath of the Wild, I barely saw anything resembling those titles. I saw a very vast open world with a few sparse game mechanics that work very well together, but the game dilutes the charm that this series historically has by putting in probably the same level of characters as any other Zelda game, but spread out an infinitely more vast world. I even think of when Wind Waker turned Hyrule into a vast ocean with a few scattered islands spread about, and people lost their minds and hated that you had to sail from one island to another. But here, suddenly, in 2017, people are eager to overlook that same issue running across vast open plains with nothing to do, just because you can, I guess, cook in a Zelda game, which you've been able to cook in stuff like World of Warcraft for a decade. You could climb in a Zelda game like in Assassin's Creed for another decade there, and you're just encouraged to explore in this Zelda game. But Elder Scrolls has been doing that since at least Morrowind. So when people talk about how Zelda Breath of the Wild is this game-changing experience, I always genuinely want to ask people how. What about Breath of the Wild will we see in games 5 years from now, 10 years from now? What is going to carry forward from this game, which to me seems just kind of like a cobbled mishmash of what a lot of other games have done before them? Are we going to see an absence of map markers like Zelda has? Okay, I don't have time to explore the farthest reaches of a map just to find another combat shrine. That's not fun for me. So I would rather something say, hey, this is what's over here, or be able to discover, hey, that's what's over there, so I know, and I can know and make the decision if I want to go explore that or not. I don't have time to invest in finding every nook and cranny of a world like that. And Fallout and Elder Scrolls, again, have been doing it for years, and have much more lived-in and character-filled worlds than Breath of the Wild did. So if that's the experience that you want, just like, oh, I don't want the Ubisoft, all the markers telling me where everything is, just turn off the markers in those games. Don't look at the map, change the legend. Do that kind of thing if that's what you're looking for here. Are we going to get climbing in every game? I mean, I couldn't tell you how many times in Breath of the Wild I slowly trudged up the side of a mountain only to find nothing, but it was a lot. So if I wanted to climb mountains for nothing other than a pretty vista at the top, I'd take up hiking again, but I would rather do almost anything else. Are we going to see more games that give you freedom at the expense of a thorough and engaging story? Because I'm going to take a big pass on that. Since you can experience the meager handful of cutscenes in this game in pretty much any order, if at all, the scenes are all designed as short little vignettes, and they stand alone, and that keeps you at arm's length from any kind of narrative through line of Zelda Breath of the Wild. And so all combined, the cutscenes I think are less than 2 hours of total gameplay. So it's entirely possible if you played it 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 hours like I did, that you probably spent more time hearing Zelda tell you about the Blood Moon coming than you got actually in the story of the game. Or are you going to get more games with weapon degradation in order to keep combat feeling fresh and different? Because if so, you're going to have to enjoy it with a side of loot boxes, which brings us to number 3 on my biggest disappointments of 2017, the overabundance we had this year of loot boxes. I've never liked these things. Just let me buy what I want, for fuck's sake, or figure out a better way to balance how to earn that stuff in the game. Or just, give it to me in the game like you used to. Loot boxes are cash grab, pure and simple. They are designed to maximize the returns on the game entirely at the expense of the player. And if games don't do a better job of regulating them, Congress will, and they will have no problem coming in and attacking this thing that they don't understand that we love, and it's going to put us on the defensive and make us look like jackasses to these people who do this shit for a living. Plenty of other people, like Jim Sterling, have gone into far more depth on these loot boxes, so I won't rehash that well-worn territory, but, fuck loot boxes. My number 2 biggest gaming disappointment of 2017 is myself. This is not intended as a woe-is-me entry on this list. I had an amazing year, filled with wonderful friends and plenty of travel and incredible opportunities. But I also spent a lot of years spinning my wheels, and I don't think I made any real significant headway in my attempts to kind of secure a job in the gaming industry. Even among my network of fellow creators, I barely collaborated with others this year, as I instead put a focus into talking into my little webcam for a half hour every day and then editing it down to a more somewhat slightly manageable bite-sized video. And even those haven't grown and developed as much as I had hoped they and I would. I enjoy that I've expanded into a wider variety of content. I'm doing more than just games. I'm talking about movies, I'm talking about television and wrestling, and a little bit of anime and comics here and there, but I'm often disappointed by the fact that I just don't have time to do more and to expand the content and really build upon the content. It is very much just me talking to a camera and then clipping it out. But I've especially struggled with the balance of my day job, which leaves me often exhausted when I come home, just mentally drained and not interested in spending an extra couple hours checking out YouTube tutorials on how to add in graphics to a video. And that's on me. That's what I am disappointed in, is that I haven't been able to take the time to do that. I have instead committed to the grind of a daily video, and that's something that I'll probably be rethinking in 2018. Can I do more with less? I also recognize on self-reflection that I have become much more of a hermit in the last couple of years than ever before. And yes, I take the occasional trip out of state and get bombarded with friends at events every few months, but in between all of that, my non-work social interactions are very few and far between. I fortunately now have a standing lunch with my friend Cameron for every WWE pay-per-view event, and I occasionally see a handful of people that I recognize or know when I, make the occasional excursion out to the theater. But in my day-to-day, I'm becoming increasingly isolated as I view the rest of the world and only show the smallest romanticized fragments of my own life through the window of social media. I'm very proud of certain aspects that I've had this year, but when I take a long, hard look at myself and what I am or am not doing to make inroads into the games industry, I know I can do better. And that's why I, myself, come in at number 2 biggest disappointment of 2017. And originally, that was going to be my number 1. It was going to be blah, 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 and then here, let's look at me for number 1 as kind of a little poignant button on it. But recent events in the last couple of days have supplanted that with a new number 1, and that is the swatting death of Andrew Finch. It's a last-minute entry on the list, and this week has shown the absolute worst elements of the extremely shitty side of the broader gaming community, in that it cost an innocent man his life. If you haven't seen the news, Earlier this week, a couple of assholes were allegedly attacking each other online over what appears to have been a $1.50 Call of Duty wager. One asshole threatened to swat the other, and if you are unfamiliar with that, swatting is a long, terrifying trend wherein one person calls a potential victim's local precinct and basically provides a false report saying, hey, there's violence here, or hey, I heard gunshots, or something, which of course leads the police force to mobilize their SWAT team to address the non-existent situation. In this particular instance, the other asshole involved egged him on and provided a fake address, and when the police were dispatched to that address after a caller reported gunshots and a hostage situation, Finch, unarmed, opened the door and was tragically shot by one of the officers on the scene. Now, there is absolutely an argument to be made that the officer never should have fired, but I would also say imagine being in that position and being told that the man inside this house has shot another person and is holding a family hostage. I fire the gun when I see a wrong shadow in a video game. So my bigger argument is that the police never should have been there in the first place. The fact that swatting is such a well-known and commonly used tactic to grief streamers and other gaming relationships is abhorrent. I can't even think of any publicized cases of rival gangs doing this kind of shit to each other, but the dregs of our gaming community have managed it and continue to destroy all of the positive work that we try and do. Irrational Passions Extra Life raised nearly $3,500 this year. Team Kinda Funny as a whole raised over $91,000. Extra Life as a whole raised over $8 million this year. But this swatting story is the one that people are going to remember, and it's the one that my mom's going to come to me and say, hey, did you hear about this thing on the news? We are better. As a community, we need to be better, fight the pieces of shit like this who tarnish what we can do, or they'll continue to bring us all down with them. I have donated to support the GoFundMe set up to help the family in this unexpected time of need. As of this recording, they've already managed to meet their $20,000 goal, but I'm sure every little bit will help them now in their time of grief. You can donate at the link in the description below. And those are my 5 biggest disappointments of 2017. What has bothered you this year? Let me know in the comments below. As always, I've been your host, Trevor Starkey from TrevorTrove.com. You can follow me at SnarkyStarkey on Twitter. You can read the full write-up of this list of disappointments over at TrevorTrove.com in another link in the description below. As always, from here at the Trove, treasure your friends.